understand her importance.
Did it ruin like her surfing life? Did she stop surfing after the movie came out? Did she continue? What happened?
To be honest, I don't know exactly. She surfed for a long time. I don't know at that period. I think it was 59. Was it? If that spoiled it, I know that a lot of the surfers from Malibu in that period say that was kind of the end of this great thing that was happening because everyone was headed west to go surfing, and the Beach Boys came in, and it became this surf craze. But she surfed most of her life. I think she still surfs.
And then the Marshall Brothers. These guys you could take and you could bring them back into Malibu back in the 50s. You could put them in the 60s. You could put them in the 70s, and they would fit in. Yep. There's something about Malibu surf culture where they are pranksters influenced by Mickey Dora, who's the originator of kind of being a wise ass and rebelling against the system. I mean, who are these guys? What are they?
There are a couple of surfers from the San Fernando Valley, although they live in Venice and Santa Monica now, but they're the best surfers at Malibu, and they're incredible characters, and they have this sort of irreverence, and they kind of laugh at everything. And they're very much the anti-jock surfer, that, what if surfing has moved towards tennis and golf, these are the guys who are pulling it the other direction. But I think the thing with Malibu, and this is we can almost draw the connection to New York, is a lot of the stuff that comes out of Malibu, I think it's very much urban influence. It's this beach that's close to this big city. So it has, there are a lot of interesting people, very diverse characters.
Nice. And then this is a very famous shot you took of Aki when he won his first world title. What was going on when you took this shot? This is probably your most well-known shot, I think, you most used at least.
Yeah, it was 1999. He was fighting for a world title. It was a big comeback because he kind of signed off surfing for a while and put on some serious weight. And he was older. I can't remember. He was in his 30s, but he was older than the average guy. But this is in Rio de Janeiro, and his opponent, the guy that he was fighting him for the world title, was in a heat, and if he lost, then Aki would have, in points, beaten him. And so he realized that it was kind of this thing where I don't want to see what's going on in the water, but this might be my moment if this guy loses. And the guy was losing, so there was this tension building up, and Aki grabbed an agua de coco, a coconut with a couple of straws poking out, and he couldn't drink it. It was just poking him in the eye. He was so nervous. And I realized, okay, this is a great moment. And I was a little bit of like a paparazzi hound, but we're friends, so I felt like it was okay, but I just sort of shadowed him. And then finally they announced it, and it was the most palpable thing. I mean, I got the goosebumps. I probably could have cried. And everyone around felt it. But it was fun to be this vicarious experience of winning a world title. I've never been so close to it.
Wow. And so now we're getting further down his career path, and I bring up a collage of photos of photographs that Brisick had taken of different people who tell surfing story. So he has like Michael Howe's band up there, Ted Grambeau, Ben Marcus, who is an editor at Surfer Magazine, all of them. And we talk a lot about like these people and their influence on storytelling in surfing. And it's kind of a fun little section. Brisick talks a little bit about his photography and shooting these people and, their influence on him.
There's such a tradition. Now, I don't know what these images look like, given that this was done in 2011. But there is this tradition, which I like, of the portraiture of in surf photography of both the surfers as well as the photographers themselves. Like,
absolutely.
They're part of this storytelling. They are part of the sport. And like they're honored in a way that I don't know if like other quote sports photographers are in a professional.
Are you kidding
thing.
me? Other sports photographers are paid way better.
This is true.
And treated way better.
No, that's true. But they don't get their rock star status.
Yeah, I mean,
like I don't know. I'm not close enough to like the photographers at like Sports Illustrated.
Oh, I mean those guys. I mean. Portrait photography is like a whole nother level, though.
Yeah,
like that's a specific skill set. to do that well is hard, and you get paid for that, more so than doing like the action shots.
Sure, that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing. But this is a fun section, and definitely worth listening to as we dive into it. And here we have people who kind of document surfing, and they all come from different angles of it too. One of the photos is a distinguished guest right here, Mr. Michael Hausband. You have on the top left Ted Grambeau, who is like what sort of photographer would you describe him as?
He's Australian. He shoots a lot of surfing, but he travels a lot, and I think he kind of likes going to the far ends of the world.
And then you have Aaron Chang on the top right.
Legendary photographer from the 80s up until now, and he's kind of shot all kinds of surf characters.
And then Ben Marcus, writer.
Yes, journalist and former associate editor at Surfer magazine.
And then you have Hausband right there.
Michael's right here.
Now, these guys all have different approaches to this sport and how they cover it, wouldn't you say? I mean, like,
Definitely.
Chang's like very meticulous, very professional. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, no, I think that what the four represent is a lot of angles in, and I think in a lot of ways it relates to how diversified surfing has become. I mean, I think the demographics have really shifted in the last 5-10 years, and so there's the pro thing, which I was a part of, and which was being pushed so hard in the early 80s, but as it's sort of grown, there's been these sort of counter trends that have come off of it. And so there's just, I guess, if we were to tie this whole thing together, there's so many different ways to be a surfer, and interestingly, because the industry has gotten so big, there's so many ways to be a pro surfer, too.
This section is more, they're photos of Brazil, his photos from Brazil. Jamie was married to someone from Brazil and had really embraced the culture, people, has incredible friends there. And it's about, basically, the section's like about Brisick and the other places he's lived. And one was Brazil and the other is New York. And so we talk a little bit, I open this section quoting him from his book, We Approach Our Martinis with Such High Expectations. And it's a doozy. It's a great quote, and it's really fun to start. But we also talk about surfing in New York, his thoughts on surf culture in New York, and the Quicksilver Pro. Jamie had lived here in New York for a while, had an apartment. I'm not sure if he still has it or not and sublets it, but... he would come through, and he once made like a film on New York surfers that I just happened to be in, by the way.
What's that called?
It's called New York Surfers, I believe. and
you're in a lot, Tyler. You're in a number of books. If someone's doing a book or a film on New York surf, I'm just gonna let you know, man. You're in a lot of them in the contemporary pantheon.
Forrest Gump of surfing.
Yeah, exactly. You just keep popping up.
But it's interesting, and how I met Jamie actually is really interesting. I was working at this adventure travel magazine, Blue, and
I didn't know you were there.
He was doing an article for them or two, and he asked to work out of their office. And he came in, and I was like shitting myself. I was like, "Oh shit, is that Jamie Brisick?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "You know him?" I'm like, "This guy was on tour in the 80s. He's amazing." Like, he was editor of Surfing Magazine.
Did
like,
any of that register with the rest of the group?
Yeah, they were just like, "Oh, it's Jamie. He's really sweet." And I was totally enamored with him.
Fanboy.
And I remember like coming up to him in the office and being like, "Mr. Brisick, I'm a real huge fan. I would love to like go out for coffee one day and just pick your brain. I'm here. I was studying writing at the time for school, and so it was amazing." And that was like how we kicked it off.
I love that.
And that was like year 2000, probably 99, 2000.
Yeah, you were in college.
Yeah, so it was interesting, and so it's interesting to hear him talk about his New York experience and Brazil as well. So without further ado, here's Brisick's thoughts on New York and Brazilian surfing. And then Brazil. I wanted to read another quote from your book.
Sure.
It's a nice little introduction because Brazil plays a very important role in your life. Your wife, Giselle, she is from Sao Paulo.
Yep, Giselle's from Sao Paulo.
So this is a great way to introduce Brazil and Brazilian culture. Selective breeding begins and ends with the ass. Forget about faces, forget about personalities, forget about what kind of family the person comes from. It's all much more primitive than this. These were the words of Guga, my intensely Brazilian friend, as we strolled the sands of Ipanema Beach. On were asses for miles, and they were as defined and pronounced as you could ever hope for good asses to be. They were asses that knew their place, asses of total certainty.
Again, marijuana, hubris, mid-20s.
But I mean, there's something about Brazilian culture that's a very loose, very relaxed, kind of fun, sexual vibe.
Yeah.
When was the first time you went to Brazil?
The first time was Fernando de Noronha in 1986 or 7. And I've been going a lot ever since. But yeah, for me, going abroad as a surfer and seeing all these other cultures, in a really slow way, started to change the way I looked at things. And Brazil I really connected with Brazil. There was something, an emotional, things are emotional and they're not sort of overthought, and I felt like I was an overthinker. I still am, and that has helped me to work more on instinct, if that makes sense.
We have in 2 of the shots Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction. He was down in Brazil with you. Tell us a little bit about these shots.
That was kind of a fun story. The gentleman who's singing with Perry his name is Marcelo Bijou, and he does a pirate radio station in a favela Vidigal, which is in Rio, and it's at the very top of the favela. And Perry was in town. We were hanging out, and he said, the guy Marcelo said, I'd like to have Perry in on my show. So we went in, and he started playing Jane's Addiction songs, and it was really great because Perry couldn't help himself, and he had to karaoke his own songs, which was really cool to watch.
And you work with the favela kids at all, or?
Not really, but when I've been in Brazil, I've spent time with them and hung out with them, and it's been a good experience. Photograph them.
New York, your second home?
Yes, a home. I think
your home.
I'm calling it home.
You're calling it home. He's claiming it. When was the first time you came over here?
I think it was. Well, I came much earlier when I was younger, but when I came and I sort of realized I liked it, I was probably 97.
Mm-hmm. And then when did you make that decision you're going to move to New York? What happened?
I had been the editor at Surfing Magazine. I was the editor for 2.5 years, and when I was finished, I realized I'd been so entrenched in surf culture and I needed a change, and I thought New York was the perfect place to move. So I came here and started subletting, and then it slowly led to living here.
Nice. And what do you think of the surf culture here?
I love it.
What do you think about the Quicksilver Pro coming to New York?
I think it's a great thing, and I think it's, again, going back to that kind of crossover of sort of urban culture with the surf. For Quicksilver to have a big event here, they probably realize that it's highly unlikely that they're going to get waves that are going to compete with Jeffreys Bay or Chopu. But there's also all this other stuff going on, which, going back to Dane Reynolds and having sort of interest beyond the beach. That's what I see going on.
Now, you've probably seen the surf culture here develop over the last 10 years. It's definitely gone through a major transition.
Huge.
Do you think this money and contests might be like a sense of innocence lost in some ways?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think so many people are interested in surfing, but here's what's interesting. I think so many people that are interested in surfing from New York are more interested in sort of surf culture, and they're not necessarily interested in the WCT or the WT, the contest side of it. And the fact that this high level of surfing is going to land on the shores is an interesting thing, and that's a different part of probably the thing that drives surfing here. I feel like it's a more cultural thing. It probably relates a lot to fashion, a lifestyle, etc. And it's going to be interesting. I think people will get to see surfing in the more narrow focus of athleticism.
You wrote an article for New York Magazine on Balaram.
Mm-hmm. Balaram Stack, the young kid getting tubed in the foliage, and he's from Long Beach, and he's the great hope for New York surfing.
Do you think he's going to fulfill?
I think so. He looks like he's on his way,
Yeah.
but a lot can happen. It's a challenging, rocky
Pretty
road.
young still.
Yeah.
And almost finally, I did